Chapter 1. 513 AD, Southwest Britannia, Medieval England, Castle Camelot, the Witching Hour. Set into the cliffs along the coast of ancient England, in a high stone castle tower overlooking the sea and Hibernia beyond, a baby cried. Outside Eyrie Tower and far below, a life and death battle for Castle Camelot raged under the black night sky. Cries of men and roars of unholy beasts filled the air and upset the baby in his crib high above the fray. The crashing of swords and armour against claw and scale filled the dark nightmare below. The baby's flailing arm caused his tiny bracelet to flash like a star in the firelight. It had been designed especially for the child. It carried a small golden seal of Camelot, a gift from his mother, the Queen Guinevere. The seal took the shape of a great lion with a serpent head locked in his powerful jaws. In this dark room, the infant was alone, but not alone. Too young to know where he was, or even who he was, he sensed intuitively that something was wrong. That something had two white, nearly blind, evil eyes. The man with the white eyes, if you could call such a creature a man, had the name of Modred. Once the faithful first son of Arthur, King of Camelot, he had fallen into darkness and allowed the tendrils of evil to slip inside his soul and leave a stain. Lurking in the shadows, his pale parchment skin stretched thinly over his bones like wet tissue paper in danger of tearing. The unpleasant features of his face now hidden in the depths of a hooded cloak. But his eyes reflected brightly from within that darkness. Despite his unusual height, he moved with the graceful purpose of a predator stalking its prey. Sweeping footfalls carried him across the room in a handful of strides. He was careful to avoid the fallen bodies of the guards in his path and paid no mind to the frothing blood that rapidly stained his worn black leather boots. The brave Royal Camelot Guard, who had been tasked to protect the babe in the tower during the battle, were highly skilled, even trained from birth, but no match for the diabolical magic the dark warlock Modred could unleash. Sailing silently to the castle window in the form of a blood-red raven, he had entered the room in the high tower undetected. Once there, Modred had unleashed his poisonous powers. He had not only killed the royal guards, but boiled their blood from within using the power of his black magic. Modred had a knack for that kind of flair, he thought, inordinately pleased with himself.
Pity the fools. They never had a chance.
He laughed softly. In the aftermath of his work, there was a heavy silence in the room, save the panicked cry of the baby and the distant drum of battle below.
Now, here I am, my little king-to-be, or rather, not to be.
He spoke softly, words wrapped in menace. The situation in the baby's tower room was inconceivable. Just hours ago, when the attack on Castle Camelot began, King Arthur believed that this location would be a safe haven for the baby, his son and heir to the throne. After all, Eyrie Tower was in the highest and strongest tower of Castle Camelot. In 500 AD, that made it the safest place in all of Old Wales. The king's most trusted friend, protector and advisor, Myrddin Ambrosius, had warned him of a coming evil approaching the castle. While the ancient and powerful mage was not sure of the timing or details, he always had an uncanny sense of trouble when danger was astir. To not heed a warning from Myrddin was to court disaster. To further ensure the safety of the heir, a garrison of battle-hardened royal guards was stationed behind the thick wood and iron door of the baby's room. With the child safely hidden from danger, the king and his knights could focus on the defense of the walls from this undefined threat. Judging from the dozen guard bodies that now lay scattered on the floor of the baby's refuge in the tower, however, the king had seriously miscalculated the cleverness of his foe. More than 300 feet below the open window of the high tower where Mordred now crept towards the babe, lay the outer defensive walls of Camelot. The pitched battle to the death was boiling between the virulent forces of Mordred's creation and the brave knights and guards of Camelot. Leading the fight from the ramparts on his great warhorse Pharamond was King Arthur himself, and by his side rode the ancient enigma, Merlin the Enchanter. The king was clad in the legendary and some say magical armour called Halavar. Myth and legend recounted that it was crafted by the dwarvian Talnoth clan from their strongholds deep under the great Matterhorn. Those ancient artisans and warriors, now long lost in time, had meticulously created this masterpiece of protection. For more than 1,000 years, it had protected its masters, kings of the land, from both blade and bite. Merlin had discovered the armour secreted away by its first owner in another age, perhaps some 600 years earlier. Hidden deep in the Gruthian barrows at the foot of the Alps, far to the east across the waters of the English Channel, only a wizard like he could have detected it. Some say the spellbound armour could not be pierced by mortal weapons. Even at this moment, hideous steel and iron weapons of the assaulting forces thundered off the king left and right. In turn, he cut down the foes around him with his mighty blade while mounted on the back of his massive warhorse. Arthur had more than superior armour on his side. Impossible to ignore was the blade of immense power in his hand. It flashed in the moonlight, cleaving enemies to the ground in single immensely powerful slashes and blows. This was the sword Excalibur, given to the king by the fairy queen Niniana herself. According to legend, it had been forged on the mystic and magical island of Avalon, hidden from mortals somewhere across the sea. It was only to be wielded by the hand of the true king of Camelot, and none other. Now, as the king swung powerful strikes, trails of burning flames ghosted behind the blade's arc. It was as though the power of Avalon itself rose to meet the enemy this night. Camelot simply could not fall, for the entire kingdom would fall with it. Mere feet away, his back to Arthur, rode the enchanter Merlin. Adorned in robes of grey satin and finely woven black linen sewn with elven thread, he sat bareback upon his faithful and valiant steed, Aracor. Some say the horse was as old as the wizard himself. No armour protected either of them, other than the magic that poured from their souls. Even the most well-aimed flaming arrow or thrust of a razor-sharp spear from the enemy found it impossible to meet the flesh of the wizard or his mount. The powerful incantations of protection cast about he and the king seemed impenetrable. Flame and fire burst like streams of superheated magma from the enchanter's hands as he cast destructive spells around his enemies along the walls of the castle.
Alto Mongata,
he shouted in a thunderous voice, willing the elements of nature themselves to assault his enemies inside the broken walls of the castle. Surely the gods themselves stood by Merlin's as deadly lightning belched from the nighttime sky, striking down the abominable foes as they clambered over the lower battlements. But there were so many. The attack on the castle had come just before the witching hour with little warning. In the depth of the murky night, Mordred and his horde of monstrous creatures had emerged from the mists of the dark forest near the castle walls. Through the soft, silent moonlight, they had marched toward Camelot from their hidden lairs in the surrounding mountains. In only moments, the congregation of evil was at the castle walls and gates. This was no known enemy of mortal men. These beasts were twisted abortions of wickedness created by black, druidic, and warlock magic. Beasts with long, writhing serpents where arms should have been, demonic, drooling hybrids of man and animal, and hulking brutes carved from wood and rock. They had stormed Castle Camelot, surging across the drawbridge normally raised to protect the castle from surprise attacks. Just as the horde approached, an evil double-cross transpired in the main Camelot gate towers. The drawbridge was lowered in a treacherous act, like a personally engraved invitation, and the monstrosities surged inside. The knights and guards bravely dove into the breach, and the fearsome battle began. Within minutes, the drawbridge was covered in bodies, both good and ghastly. No hope of raising the bloody bridge remained. The gates of Camelot, the greatest fortress since the castle of Dover, lay open to the world, and evil was having its day.